All right, guys, so this is section 4.4, part 2. And in this case, in example 1, we're going to factor by grouping. Okay, so this is just more factoring in a different variety. So we factor by grouping, typically speaking, when we have 4 terms. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to group these terms in pairs of 2. So I'm going to group like x cubed plus 5x squared plus a negative 4x minus 20. Okay, now when I do that, I'm going to look at these as separate groupings at first. So I can pull out an x squared over here, and I'm left with an x plus 5. Okay, and then over here, typically, guys, I want this value to be positive. So I can pull out a negative 4 here, and when I do, I'm left with x plus 5. Okay, so to factor by grouping, this is exactly what I want. Okay, when I factor these out, I want them to have the same thing to factor out from. Okay, so both of these have x plus 5. So now what I can do is I can factor out an x plus 5 from both of these. And what I'm left with is an x squared minus 4. Okay, so that's factoring by grouping. But if we look, I'm still not done because this is the difference of squares. Okay, so x squared minus 4 factors to x plus 2 and x minus 2. And then don't forget your x plus 5. So this here is this in fully factored form. All right, guys, so let's look at B here. Let me draw a line here. Probably run out of room, that's okay. All right, so once again, I'm going to group 2's. So I'm going to group the x cubed minus 8x squared plus my negative 4x plus 32. Okay, so then I'm going to factor each of these separately. Okay, so this here, I can pull out an x squared, and when I do, I have an x minus 8 left over. And then for this here, I can pull out, remember, I want this to match this, so I want this to be an x. So I'm going to pull out a negative 4, and I'm left with an x minus 8. Okay, so once again, I have my x minus 8, my x minus 8, which is exactly what I want, because now I can factor out an x minus 8 from both of those, and what I'm left with is x squared minus 4. Okay, but like the first one, notice that this simplifies more. Okay, so x minus 8 I keep, and then remember x squared minus 4 is a difference of squares, so this just goes to x minus 2 and x plus 2. All right, so I want you to go ahead and try C on your own, and then we'll come back and go over it. All right, guys, so this is what you should have done here. Okay, so you should have pulled these apart. You can factor out an x, or you can factor an x minus 2 out of both of these. That's kind of your common factor among the two groupings. And you're left with x squared minus 9. Now remember, x squared minus 9 goes to x minus 3 and x plus 3. Okay, so this is your final answer. Now, one thing I do want to note is that when you have 4 terms, you can also just put them in the box. Okay, so we have x cubed minus 2x squared minus 9x plus 18. Okay, so if we take out an x here, we want the common factor among these. Okay, so common factor among those is an x. So if that's an x, this has to be an x squared. If this is an x squared, this is a negative 2. If this is an x, this is a negative 9x. This has to be a negative 9, and all is good. Negative 9 times negative 2 is positive 18. So if we put this in the box, what I would get is the x minus 2 times x squared minus 9, which is right here. Okay, and then of course, this is a difference of squares, so we can go a step further and do x minus 2, then x minus 3, and x plus 3, and we would get the final answer. All right, let's look at example 2 now. Okay, now this here should be familiar as a difference of squares. Okay, so remember a squared minus b squared is the same factors to a minus b, a plus b. Okay, so think of this as 4x squared squared minus 9 squared. Okay, so if you think of it in terms like this, that means your 4x squared is your A and your 9 is your B. Okay, so when I put it into A minus B, A plus B, what we'd get is 4x squared minus 9 and 4x squared plus 9. Okay, now notice this here is also a difference of squares. Okay, because this can be written as 2x squared minus 3 squared. Okay, so in this case, 2x is our A, 3 is our B. Okay, so I can rewrite this right here as 2x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. And then don't forget to bring this down, 4x squared plus 9. And remember, there is no sum of squares, so this here cannot be factored. Okay, so this would be our final answer. All right, so if I look at B, guys, okay, the first thing I always want to do is I always want to take out my GCF, which I do have here. Okay, so I can take out a 3p squared here, and I'm left with p to the 6th plus 5p to the 3rd plus 6. Okay, now this is kind of confusing because if this was a squared and this was just a 1, we could do it. Okay, but anything such that this is even and this is half of the exponent of the first and this doesn't have an exponent, we can still use what we know about quadratics. Okay, so in this case, we can still think about the fact that we want two numbers that multiply to a times c. So in this case, a is 1, c is 6. So we want two numbers that multiply to 6, but those two numbers also have to add to b, which is 5. Okay, well, obviously that is, 5 and 1. Sorry, brain fart. That is not 5 and 1. That is 2 and 3. Okay. 2 and 3. My bad. Okay, so that means that we can break this apart and write it as p to the 6th plus 2p cubed plus 3p cubed plus 6. Okay, and now we've taken that and we've rewritten it with 4 terms, so I can put it in the box. Okay, so I have p to the 6th plus 2p cubed plus 3p cubed plus 6. Okay, so if I factor this, I can factor out a p cubed, which makes this a p cubed. This is 2p cubed, this has to be 2, this has to be 3. And to check ourselves, does 3 times 2 equal 6? It surely does. Okay, so this here factors into your p cubed plus 2 and p cubed plus 3, but don't forget the GCF that we pulled out, and this is our final answer. All right, so next you see the monitoring progress, okay? So I'm not going to go through these one by one, but if you feel like you need more practice, I want you to pause this video. I want you to go over them, do them yourself, and then I will go ahead and work them out and show you the final answers step by step so you can check yourself. All right, guys, so this is what you should have gotten here.